And how does the defendant plead?
Your Honor, at this time, my client wishes to plead.
Your Honor, I wish to plead myself, if I may. I cannot deny my actions. After all, the whole world has seen me do what I did. Probably seen it many times over since it happened. Am I guilty of murder? No. As the whole world has seen just as many times, is that I acted in self-defense. I plead not guilty of murder.
Quiet, please, from the audience. Mr. Kyle, I note your plea. Does the counsel wish to add anything?
No, Your Honor.
And how about the government?
No, Your Honor.
As you know, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, after all, you've had an extensive instruction, is that there is only a single charge brought against the defendant, that of murder, that he murdered the victim. We have instructed you specifically on the definition of murder as compared to other related definitions of the Penal Code, which are not at issue. We are also not, I repeat, not addressing aggravating or extenuating factors, because that would only be relevant at a time of sentencing. We are inquiring on a strict yes/no question. Both the prosecution and the defense have the task of conveying to you, the jury, the best possible, most complete picture of whatever they feel is relevant to the event and the defendant's alleged culpability. I have the right, and I feel even the duty, to keep the proceedings fair and orderly and preclude abuses by anyone. I'm known for zero tolerance on that score. Don't even try it. Anybody. Also, just so you know, we have all scheduled participants sworn in ahead of time to streamline these proceedings and, frankly, to reduce theatrics. Having said all that, is the government ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. The government would like to call John Dudley. Mr. Dudley, we've called you here today because we consider you an expert when it comes to the character of the accused, not in the technical sense, but as one who has known him and worked with him, alongside him for many, many years.
25 to be exact.
We'll get to that in a minute. But first, are you currently working with the accused?
No, I am not.
And why is that, Mr. Dudley?
I had asked for a transfer about a year ago, half a year or so, because I felt uncomfortable working with the defendant.
And why was that?
You see, off duty, I saw him reading law books, books about the Constitution, political stuff. And so I thought, why is somebody like this reading this kind of stuff that might make him start to question things? You know what I mean?
Objection, Your Honor. The government is asking the witness to speculate and go out on some conspiracy limb.
No, we don't know yet where the government is going with this, so I'm going to overrule. The witness may proceed. So,
As I said, I just got to a place where I had this sense that I just, I didn't want to ask him point blank if he was up to something.
Again, Your Honor, we must object. To try and use the witness's machinations in order to concoct some sort of sinister motive on the part of the defendant is way out of line.
I have to agree, basically, but I will give the government one more chance to get some factual evidentiary substance, but that's it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Dudley, please outline to us actual behavior that, in your estimation, constituted suspicious behavior.
Well, see, having known him for so long, well, you get used to chatting in a way, like something you're used to. And that's what it stopped. Normal job-related small talk, he just didn't respond the usual way anymore. He looked at everything in a strange, dubious...
Okay, that's enough. If the government has no specific questions for the witness, I will turn this over to the defense.
Let me try this, Your Honor. How close would you say you really were to Mr. Kyle, your longtime colleague, Anthony Kyle?
Well, like, you know, you do your shift, sometimes the same, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you attend training together. You always go to briefings together because everybody has to be on the same page. I mean, it's the most important assignment in the nation.
Would you say you were friends, like buddies?
How do you mean?
What we mean is, for instance, did you know, Mr. Dudley, what your colleague Anthony Kyle did off duty? What was important to him?
You mean like if he's married or not?
That too, but more like, okay, let's stick with that. Is Mr. Kyle married, to your knowledge?
Well, I thought he was.
Why was that, Mr. Dudley?
Well, like, he never wanted to go out for a drink or anything. He was just too busy. There was no space for getting closer to him.
Are you married, Mr. Dudley?
Objection, Your Honor. The question is irrelevant to the witness's observations.
Oh, quite relevant, Your Honor. When it comes to one person wanting to get closer to one another.
Overruled.
Well, no, I'm not.
So, you are not married, and you have been interested over many years to get closer to the defendant? Do I see that right?
Yeah, maybe.
And then year after year, Anthony Kyle showed no interest to get to know you better? How does that feel?
I don't know. You wonder.
Let me ask you something else, Mr. Dudley. Did you know that Mr. Kyle was studying to be a lawyer?
What?
No further questions for the witness at this time.
Our next witness, Your Honor, is Melody Price.
Go ahead, Miss Price.
So, Miss Price, would you please tell us briefly how you relate to both the accused and the victim?
My name is Melody Price, and I was communications coordinator for the deceased. I also encountered the defendant regularly as he was part of the Secret Service detail assigned to the deceased.
Miss Price, what we would like to learn from you is to what extent the deceased had any sense of being in danger.
You mean why he got himself a gun?
More like if he'd ever said something about, how shall I put it without sounding, maybe that some people would like to see him dead.
He never said anything like that to me, but then I'm just a woman.
But as a woman, you have a better sense of what occupies a man's mind, maybe. No, of course not that, but in a sort of more public way.
I really don't know. Only that he became more and more distracted by something, and he was almost impossible to get an answer from.
Do you believe people were after him?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer the
I
question.
don't know. There was nothing specific. I mean, if you're that high in politics, you have some enemies.
Did you ever talk to the accused, Miss Price? What was your sense of him?
There wasn't much to like or not like. I know him as a quiet, attentive person. A little very quiet, maybe. Something like serious, but also nothing phony. He helped me get my car started once when I got my keys stuck in the wrong way. Not sure how he did it, really.
Now, can you recall any special details about the day of the incident?
Strange thing, I remember clearly all the usual formalities, trip preparations and all, but there was no press release. I mean, what the trip was to be about, you know? All we had was the tweet from the night before. When I asked him, the president, in passing in the hallway, he just said, "You'll see."
Anything else you remember that we should know?
Strange thing, and it's probably nothing, but I was actually a little worried, except that it wasn't my place to be worried, because there was something about his posture, a little to one side, and he held his right arm close to his side, almost like leaning to the right.
And?
Maybe that's where he had the gun, in the right coat pocket.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Price, please stay. Maybe the defense has some questions?
Thank you, Your Honor. No questions from us at this time. However, may we call the witness back at a later time?
You may.
Our next witness, Your Honor, is Jennifer Krantz.
She is further down on my list. Any reason for the switch?
Time constraint, Your Honor. Miss Krantz, thank you for coming all the way from Florida to give your testimony in person. You may have knowledge or information, or let's call it a viewpoint, that no one else can contribute. Let's get one suspicion out of the way. Miss Krantz, you had an amiable divorce from the accused, did you not?
I did.
We're asking this to deal with the suspicion that there's any animosity on your part that would make you less than truthful.
You need not worry.
A chat like this, Your Honor, really seems inappropriate.
Wouldn't worry too much at this point, Mr. Shepard, but you are right. Let's all stick to straight questions and answers.
Of course, Your Honor. Okay, Miss Krantz, how long have you been separated, divorced from the defendant?
About 10 years. 10 years and 2 months, to be precise.
And may I ask what precipitated the divorce?
Money. Not the way you understand it, maybe. It was, now that it's been a long time, I can see it more clearly.
Explain, please, Miss Krantz.
Expectations, disappointed expectations. He, Anthony, was all about law, going to law school, studying to become a lawyer, a professional. I was all geared to be married to a lawyer. My parents were looking forward to having a lawyer in the family. But then he got on this kick of serving his country, and off he went. Did a couple of tours overseas and when he came back, I mean, with all due respect, I did not volunteer to serve my country. He did that. And when he came back, instead of going back to law school, he applied for the Secret Service. And with his qualification, of course, he got in, and I got out.
You had mentioned something else about that kick to serve his country?
Yeah, it seemed to me like he had the feeling of being on, you know, some kind of a mission.
What kind of a mission do you mean?
Well, he was talking about what he called a meaning to being an American. I mean, as if being an American wasn't enough. It had to have meaning. That was another one of those nails in the coffin of our marriage, you know. He talked to his new friends about creating a party, but it wasn't just like Democrats or Republicans. He wanted something better. He called it idealism. Nails
Let me follow up on this a little, if I may, Ms. Kranz.
Sure.
A woman tends to have a sort of sense of,
That's enough of a fishing expedition for a conspiracy, Your Honor. We object.
It seems a little obvious to me, too. Let me ask you, Ms. Wen, do you have something specific? And if you do, make your question specific and produce something we can all see, not some invisible ink kind of insinuation.
sorry, Your Honor, I did not mean to.
Sure, she didn't mean to.
What I was trying to produce here, Your Honor, is testimony about the accused's state of mind and how he may have been involved with people, associated with.
No. End of fishing trip, Miss Wen. And I will ask the jury to ignore that fishing expedition. Ask a specific question or turn the witness over to the defense.
No more questions at this time, Your Honor. And my apologies. Believe me,
I know you didn't mean to. Your witness.
Just a few follow-ups, Ms. Krantz. So, how long did you say you have been divorced from the accused? Was it 10 years?
Yes, Your Honor, 10 years.
I'm not the judge, Ms. Krantz. No need for the Your Honor. So, and how close have you been with him since?
What do you mean, close?
Seen him every weekend or spent holidays together, or one has to ask that nowadays, been Facebook friends forever, anything like that?
No, not really, none of that.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see it, when you told the court about Mr. Kyle, it's based on what happened 10 years ago.
I guess so.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Our next witness, Your Honor, Stephen McBride.
Glad you could make it, Mr. McBride.
Sorry I'm late. I went to the wrong courthouse. I should have known better.
Since you're late, you need to be sworn in, Mr. McBride. To keep it simple, let me do that right now. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, on penalty of perjury?
I do.
Then let's dive into the matter, Mr. McBride. You are an assistant to Miss Price, is that correct?
The assistant to Melody Price. Yes, that's correct. I'm supposed to be everywhere all the time.
We called you to testify, Mr. McBride, because you were present at the time and in the immediate vicinity of the incident. And what can you tell us? Use your own words and just talk like you would talk to a friend.
Okay, so I had just received a revised press release, and I was glancing over it. It had to do with the attendance and rededication of the towers for an interior overhaul. You know, that's what the whole event was about. But I also had a communique from the city in my hand that mentioned maximum crowd capacity on 5th Avenue between Central Park and 54th Street. It was all very last minute and confused. But who am I? I thought they'll know what they're doing.
In what sense is that, Mr. McBride?
It didn't work. The city had stipulated a maximum of 5,000 that it had the personnel to safely manage, and that's normal. But the press release Ms. Price had given me mentioned 500,000. I really didn't know what to do there. There was noise and screaming inside the towers. The press was all lined up outside, except I didn't see a lot of people in the streets, mostly security, police, cars, and the Beast, which was a relief.
The what?
The Beast. That's what they call the super safe limousine. It weighs about 10 tons.
Ah, that.
So everybody was very on edge because the boss was super irritated about the whole event, how it sort of fizzled away, really. I'd never seen him in such a state. Words were something like, people didn't know who he was and that they were going to find out. Something like that.
And can you tell us where the defendant was at that time?
What? He? Captain Kyle. I didn't see him, but I knew his assignment was intermediate periphery, so I assumed he was on the far side of the street.
But you didn't actually see him, right?
No. But even if he had been there, man, I was so stressed. I barely saw the shiny floor underneath my feet. I nearly stumbled out at the first steps because I was on my phone trying to get back to Miss Price on the strange press release. And at the same time, tried to text her to look at the latest tweet about how the media was sabotaging this historic event. And at the same time, there was a feeling of, you know, a flood coming from behind me.
A flood?
People. People in the lobby behind me rushing to catch up to or get ahead of something or someone. But there he was. He was running ahead of everybody, running to the doors, pushing through them. And he took maybe 20 steps outside and suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way, but he was really like glued to the spot. He looked around the scene, saw the lineup of press and cameras, and started talking at first, but became more screaming as it went on. And he pointed to a few journalists that he recognized. You did this on purpose. You did this on purpose to embarrass me. You'll pay for this. You'll all pay for this. And then he turned the other way where the guests of honor were. And he started talking to them, something like, but all the while he kept pointing at the press, saying, these are all traitors against the Constitution.
If I may, I would like to remind the government that we will need corroborating evidence for all of this, right?
We're aware of that, Your Honor. And what happened next?
Some of us were trying to catch up to him, sort of calm him down just by being there.
Was the First Lady with him?
To my knowledge, she was not scheduled at this event, so we tried to keep up with him. When he first saw the row of microphones, he stopped and he explained the event. and his plan to turn this tower into a prime example of sustainability. Manhattan had never seen anything that big. He pointed across the empty street at what he called his loyal fans, who knew that he kept his promises or something like that. And then suddenly he stopped. He started fumbling into his right coat pocket and he pulled out a gun. A pistol. But it seemed like he didn't really know what to do with it. He just pointed it at the opposite side of the street. It seemed like he was trying to pull the trigger, but nothing happened. Then he started fumbling around again. That's when he turned around and made his first shot, aimed at Mr. Korngold. I don't know why him, but he had dropped behind the ledge of the entrance. You know, Your Honor, I'm not a hero. I'm not a soldier. I'm a paper pusher, you could say. And I didn't want to die. Nobody wanted to die. We were all, like, frozen. But the Secret Service guys started coming out from wherever they come from. Some of them had their guns drawn, but I don't think any of them knew how to handle that situation. By that time, we could hear helicopters overhead. Then he stopped and started hollering like he was at one of his chopper talks. Something like, "I told you, the nation, that I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight. Remember that, remember that." At that point, some of the Secret Service guys from the side had started moving in a little bit closer. I heard one of them call out, "Sir, sir, would you please put down the gun? Sir, put down the gun." I didn't see the guy fall, just people around him go and try to help. But they were also afraid of where the next shot would go, if there would be a next shot. And that's when I first saw the defendant approach from the left side, uptown, that is. He was also asking, more like pleading, "Put down the gun, sir." And then the president turned around and shot towards the building. There were a lot of people, but nobody got hit, miraculously. "I told you nothing can happen to me when I shoot one of you traitors," and he fired another shot. I heard it whiz right by me. Then he noticed the Secret Service people having come closer and closer. He raised his gun again and pointed it at the defendant. "Your job is to protect me, not to protect them," he said, waving the gun in front of the people. And then he pointed the gun back at the defendant and screamed, "You're fired. You are fired." And he pulled the trigger. And he hit the defendant. I'm not sure where, but I saw him fall down to his knees. And that's when, at the same time, the defendant raised his weapon and fired one shot. You know, the way trained guys do with both hands. And then he collapsed in pain. And the president just stood there for the longest time with the gun still in his hands. And then he sort of collapsed in on himself, you know, under his own weight.
I've been thinking over the break, and I've also consulted case law. What we are here to do is not to rehash something we all know and have seen countless times. We are here to see and hear evidence that will help us determine if the defendant, in this case, Anthony Kyle, is guilty of murder. There may be a number of definitions and degrees in people's minds, but in this case, we will only address premeditation and intent. Let me explain that. In order to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Anthony Kyle, premeditated the situation in which he would draw his gun and shoot, we have to show and substantiate that he plotted to create the situation, that he had knowledge of factors that would contribute to eventuating the situation, that he had a motive, and that's where the conspiracy notions come in, if there are any. And finally, that at any time during the events at issue, he formed an intent on which he acted to shoot his victim. The reality show is over. At least it's not playing in this courtroom. And lacking substantial evidence for any of these factors, there is no case. I will dismiss the case sua sponte. Having said that, I'd like to urge both parties to get to the point. Make or break the case. But as I said, no reality show. No cameras here anyway, makes for lousy ratings. I will give you one more thing. You are both dancing on a knife's edge. How? Because if you show that the defendant had knowledge of the victim's deleterious state of mind, even so as to premeditate the situation the way it eventuated, you will also have to show a motive. And you'd be facing the defense establishing that everyone knew his state of mind, and how many others may have had A, the same knowledge, and B, the same possible motivation. For you, the defense team, you have to realize that any hole you would like to shoot in the government's case, pardon the pun, may go off backwards. Bottom line to all of you, we will not entertain speculation nor fishing expeditions. Are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor, we are.
Yes, Your Honor.
We're calling Kevin Broward.
Mr. Broward, sunglasses?
You're ready to testify, Mr. Broward?
Yes, ma'am.
Please tell us exactly what you saw when you arrived at the scene.
I have to qualify something. What you may not know is that I studied psychology before I joined the NYPD. So everything I see, I also see with the eyes of the psychologist, somewhat at least.
Mind.
I usually don't do street, but I was on duty one street over that late morning when we got the call. So it took me maybe 25 seconds, half a minute to get to Fifth Avenue, and maybe 15 seconds more to get close. And what I saw was not a pretty picture. I say that because there were the press people, most of them huddled over someone on their side, and there were the Secret Service people kneeling ahead of me next to someone. Actually, they were trying to lift him to something of a sitting position. Sort of puzzled me because the first aid, well, you learn how to place an injured body on his side and so on, but what I saw looked bad. He was one of the people holding the body, yes. And there were two guns on the ground. One clearly a service pistol, and the other was some kind of subcompact, but I couldn't tell which. Maybe something for it. I didn't want to touch anything, and I didn't. And since no one made any move towards either of the guns, I didn't feel I needed to. What I found striking on that situation was how the defendant killed the body. It didn't make sense. At the time, I didn't know that he was injured and that he was the person who had shot the president. All I know, he got up a few moments later and came limping toward me and said in a kind of bloodless voice, "It was me. I had to, in self-defense. I shot him in self-defense. Nobody knew he had a gun on him. Nobody knew." And then I turned to the huddle of press people. The man they were holding seemed deceased as well. He was laying across a woman's lap like in one of those religious pictures. She was sitting on the ground. Some people were kneeling next to her, trying to take camera straps off their shoulders. A few of them were actually taking pictures in all kinds of directions. And then trying to get close to the Secret Service huddle, but couldn't. Some of them, the Secret Service guys, they kept looking up into the sky. I guess they were trying to make sure there weren't any snipers anywhere.
Can you get back to what you noticed about the defendant? Was the defendant among the Secret Service people, Officer Broward?
Make that Captain Broward. Not important, but you know, I earned it. So, about the defendant, Anthony Kyle, it all happened so fast, and then there is this surreal sense to it, like slow motion, because your mind is working at triple speed. That was when the defendant himself sort of collapsed from blood loss, I guess, and another ambulance drove up onto the sidewalk, and they loaded him up on a gurney and carried him to the truck. That's the last I saw of him at the scene. One of the Secret Service people went with him. Another thing that made it, the whole scene so weird is that there were basically no people around. No spectators to mention, let alone crowds. I was assigned to that location at the last minute because of the press releases coming into the department that they needed more bodies to handle overflow into the side streets. Well,
what?
As I said in the beginning, I studied psychology. Not that I am trying to be some kind of expert witness about the state of mind of a dead man, but that paranoid sense of unreality was hanging over the whole event. Hard to explain, but have you ever experienced a solar eclipse? There is a sudden vacuum of something, a quiet that sort of takes your breath away. Maybe you know what I mean. It makes no sense, but then...
Let me ask you something point blank. Could anything about the event have been predictable to someone close or at least in the vicinity of the president?
Objection. Absolutely inappropriate to ask the witness to speculate. Next. What, tea leaves?
I have to agree. That really goes too far, at least for a courtroom. You may ask this kind of question over a beer, but not here. Sustained.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Your witness.
Strange thing, Captain Broward. I've been thinking in the back of my mind, If Broward had been in Kyle's situation, what would he have done?
Your Honor!
Well, I really can't say, only if I had been in the vicinity of a heavily disturbed person, we'll just have to assume that for your question, then there is something in the air, as the expression goes, which means that if I wanted to answer your question about predictable, the answer would really have to be no. But would an outside person have gotten a sense of something going on? Well, yes, absolutely. Now, let me explain why I'm saying that. If you are in an environment where everything has a certain, let's use smell. Let's say French fries. After a while, you do not smell that anymore. Only when you get outside, other people will. It's a little like that. So I assume that if you were around that atmosphere in there all the time, it must have become something like the water you swim in, the air you breathe. So in a way, you're asking the wrong question.
Oh, okay, let me try to rephrase this. If someone who is not routinely, as you call it, swimming in that water, had entered in that space which existed around the president on that fateful day, in other words, someone whose discernment was not compromised by a vested interest in the outcome, would that person have been able to predict the occurrence of something dramatic?
Yes and no. For a single reason, it is yes and no. So, if you mean an irate rant or screaming or slamming this or that, absolutely yes. But when it comes to dramatic in the sense of someone pulling out a gun and killing people, absolutely no. Simply because no one knew he was carrying that gun.
No one.
Well, only him and the person who gave it to him, loaded, mind you, because, you know, if I give an historic gun to someone as a present, like something to hang on the wall, then I don't include a loaded clip and already chamber the first round. So that leaves only two people who could have predicted fatal events. Either whoever provided the gun or its recipient. And one of them is deceased.
And since the accused is definitely not the other one, the source of the gun, then there cannot possibly have been any premeditation on his part. Would that be a fair, let's say, inference from the facts you just provided?
Facts.
You have a better one?
Let's stay cool. Your Honor, may we have a brief recess? And if we determine who the source of that gun was, could we establish an emergency telelink with that person?
I see no reason to deny that request. That is, unless the government has one.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Counsel, were you able to retrieve Mr. LaPierre and get him to be with us?
No, Your Honor, but we can provide a statement, sworn affidavit, if you so require, Your Honor.
For the moment, that may do. Could you fax that right now, signed? But there may come a situation where we need the witness in person. Could you advise your client of that, please?
And then, Your Honor, we would need to know as well if he's willing to oblige or if we need a subpoena.
Can't give you that at this point, counsel. That is, cannot.
So, here we have it, the facts. Will counsel please read the witness statement into the record?
Here we go. To whom it may concern, I, the undersigned, Wayne Robert LaPierre, at no time provided the President, DJT, with any device capable of inflicting harm to a person. I did gift the President, at the occasion of occasional personal visit at his Doral Golf Club, with a non-operational, obsolete, historic handgun several months ago. The item was determined to be non-operational because, to the best of my knowledge, there exists no legally available ammunition for it in this country. It's signed Wayne Robert LaPierre. Then there's a notary seal and another signature, which I cannot read, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Schiller, thank you for the statement. Do we have any corroborating evidence of those statements? The item itself, of course, is in evidence, but its state has proven to be clearly not as your client has described it.
Can't make any statement to that.
But please be prepared to stay in contact.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may we request permission to provide expert testimony on the characteristics of the President's handgun provided by Mr. LaPierre? I mean, both the gun and the characteristics.
You provide the witness and let us know. All right. Am I correct that the government has released the witness?
Can we recall him for right now for a few more questions relating to the new subject of the ammunition?
Of course.
Mr. Broward, are we entirely wrong? Or could you possibly enlighten us a bit about a possible black market in illegal arms and ammunition?
Well, if you want a certified expert on the subject, I may not be your guy, but then I'm not so sure you'll find an officially certified expert on the black market.
Give it a try, and we'll note your... Give it a try, and we'll note your non-certified status.
Okay. So what you need to know, well, keep in mind I've investigated a few gang or mafia-related crimes now and then. And one of the common denominators in all of them is non-traceable ownership of guns. Of course, you can't get that if your gun is associated with any known event, even if it is theft. Because if I steal a gun, for example, someone is going to file a report saying something like gun of brand A, serial number such and such, and X number of boxes ammunition were stolen. So law enforcement knows and is on the alert for when and where such items may appear. It's almost like advertising, and of course you don't want to do that. The alternative is using what doesn't exist and which no one is looking for. And that's where third country black market guns and surplus ammunition, which sometimes have traveled the world several times, come into play.
Interesting. Sort of logical, but still fascinating.
So then you may have obsolete or somehow previous generation Russian submachine guns bootlegged, meaning manufactured in China or in Afghanistan or, of course, North Korea, and then transported literally anywhere in the world. Now, you also need ammunition. That may be a little trickier because, you know, you just need more of it on an ongoing basis. It's a little like drugs. And as I've said, the main thing of invisibility here is that no part of it must be legal. Anything legal has something traceable to it.
So when the gun given to the president as a present was described as non-operational due to the lack of legal ammunition, that limitation applied only as long as you move within the realm of legality. Am I getting that right?
A plus, if I may say so. Not knowing anything specifically about the gun in question, I can't point you to the black market where you can buy what you need to turn that non-operation into pretty fatal.
Thank you very much, Captain Broward. Really very enlightening.
You have to figure out who did that.
Thank you very much, Captain Broward. Really very enlightening.
Creates a pickle, though.
What kind of a pickle?
Our job is to prove that the accused could possibly have had intent, and now we're looking at going further and further back to who could have possibly known what and when. And that looks a lot like it's creating a catch-22, also known as shooting ourselves in the foot, also known as proving the accused innocent in the process.
You can withdraw, in theory.
Of course not. Your Honor, I'm just letting you know that we are aware of the development and that we just may have to develop a different trajectory.
We would like to excuse the witness for now and recall Stephen McBride, if we may, Your Honor.
All right with me, if the defense has no objection. Mr. McBride, could you please come back up here?
Thank you, Mr. McBride. I'm afraid we will be asking you questions to which we have no answers. We all, as well as justice, perhaps even history, depend on you, as well as the forbearance of counsel. The challenge we're facing, my friend, is that we need to explore the periphery of your work and your work experience, rather than the explicit, documented, or logged tasks and schedules. Are you willing to go there?
I will do my best.
Were you present at the occasion at Dorrell, mentioned in the Lapierre affidavit?
Sorry to say, no. I don't really like travel that much. I prefer minding the shop at home, if I may call it that. I leave the limelight to my colleagues. But not that I would consider myself a shadow lurker. I just like the quiet. Strange thing to say in the kind of environment I work.
Did you see or hear anything about the gift being brought back into the White House or the resident afterwards?
Not personally. Not personally that I actually saw the item, the gun, or a gun case. I think it was some kind of rustic gun case. I was told, but I didn't see it. What I did hear were comments, or rather rumored questions, about what good an old gun was going to do him.
How come?
He has no weapons permit. For one, needs to be a concealed permit, you know. Then the gun must be registered. I doubt that gun was registered. And then you can't have ammo for an unregistered gun, especially if it's illegal ammo. I did a little bit of reading up on this. And that's only in DC. New York has its own rules, New York State and New York City. And even the state restrictions alone would not allow for an import on a non-registered gun.
Bottom line?
No good, the gun. Not legally, at least, and not practically. And that's what I said is what the rumors were about.
You married, Mr. McBride?
What? Of course, 5 years.
Forgive me for sort of ambushing you with that question, but Since you seem to have been researching things like this at home, I was wondering.
My wife studies veterinary medicine, so she's quite busy herself.
Any idea where these rumors came from?
Not exactly an identifiable person, more a general vicinity. First of all, very few people knew officially of the present. That's what it was called. And I know of no event where it became publicly visible.
You recall Mr. Broward's testimony, Mr. McBride, that the ammunition for that gun is illegal to have or sell or buy in this country? You remember that?
I do, which makes me a little nervous also, because I don't want to cause problems for anybody, especially considering the huge importance of this.
Which
We're
you
worried
are
about that.
absolutely not. I assure you.
I just said yes when you asked me if I wanted to be a witness. Other people hired their own attorneys. I don't want to get in trouble either.
Which you are absolutely not. I assure you.
So, this is probably all I can tell you on the rumor about the non-op gun. The rest you already know. Like the famous I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, nobody knew this was going to become real one day. I didn't.
Thought about it since?
Since when?
From the time you've worked for Miss Price up to, of course, the time of the shooting.
It did cross my mind briefly, especially around the time that the gun rumor went around. What's strange, in retrospect at least, that present never had any very official status.
I remember you said that.
I did.
Many remember any of the people you may have heard talking about it, Mr. McBride. Anything wrong? You don't have to make anything up just to please us, you know.
There was a time, about a month or so before the shooting, when I was shooed off of the West Wing hallway and told to mind my own business, and it was for no reason at all. I was just turning around in the hallway because I had forgotten something I had wanted or needed to bring to Miss Price. So it caught my attention that someone was apparently very tense or apprehensive about something and barking orders all over the place, like, I don't know, like there was some crisis in somebody's mind.
And how did you know it was about the present?
Because someone in passing was muttering something about he can have illegal ammo if he wants it. He can have anything, which was clearly in reference to the president. I was looking around at the time to see if any Secret Service people had overheard, but nobody moved a muscle, so I paid no mind. Until about a month later, that is.
You any idea?
One last question from us, that is, did you have the impression that there was an explicit request or demand by the president to help him make the present operational?
I think so.
Thank you so much. You're excused for now, but please hang around to testify for the defense.
How generous. We are likely to ask for that.
I think we have a couple more witnesses, Your Honor. Is Mr. Miller there?
Yes, I am here.
So we're switching to a different angle of events, and as a cameraman, you know all about angles.
Yes, I am a cameraman for the WGCW network, and I was assigned to cover the Fifth Avenue event on that day. With me was our Metro reporter, Greg Mattler. May he rest in peace.
Could you please describe your recollection of the fateful day? We do have your video footage and evidence, so you may refer to it as well.
It was an odd situation somehow with all those Secret Service people and police and a huge media lineup in front of the building, including at least one helicopter overhead. Of course, from above the canyon-like streets, it added an eerie flavor. We had been lined up there for maybe half an hour when the first Secret Service guys came through the door, but nobody else followed. Just very loud, angry voices, and everything died down once the doors closed again. Finally, I saw it on my display. The door stormed open and the president almost lunged out, pushed everyone else aside so he could address the row of microphones. I didn't listen to what he said because that's what microphones are for, and I'm just the video guy. But I saw Mr. Korngold move away in a strange sideways fashion, like, I'm not really here. Meanwhile, the president flat out stated that the entire redesign was his idea, all of it, down to the last detail, that it was an event for the betterment of the country, and he apologized for all the many tens of thousands of people who were not permitted to attend closer. He claimed security reasons, as far as I recall. The organizers, I assumed, he said, had to fend off almost 500,000 people, and so on, and his voice got louder and louder, even though the choppers had left. 500,000 people who know what is important for the country, my loyal fans, or something like that. When I looked over to Mattler to see if he was preparing any questions or wanted me to move a certain direction with my focus, he merely shrugged. And what happened next was so fast. I'm having a hard time.
Are you all right, Mr. Miller?
It seems the president saw Greg shrugging and came closer to us with, there's the fake media again, know nothing. And he imitated Greg's shrug several times. It seemed manic, just couldn't let go. I got really scared, but he walked away a few steps back toward the building, and he started fumbling into his coat pocket while pointing at the building with his other hand. What he produced was a gun, and he pointed it at Mr. Korngold, screaming, "You're a fraud, Frank," and repeated it, "Frank the fraud, Frank the fraud." I don't know how many times. It looked like he wanted to shoot the man, but nothing happened. He stopped and fumbled around the gun, probably with the safety catch or something. When I looked up from the viewfinder, I saw out of the corner of my eyes some Secret Service people moving in closer, weapons drawn, but cautiously, like you didn't even see them move. But before they could really get closer, he had managed to undo the safety and screamed in the direction of Mr. Korngold, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired, loser," and shot at Mr. Korngold, but missed because he had dropped behind the edge of the building.
Are you all right, Mr. Miller? We can take a brief recess if you need it.
Then he turned around suddenly and lunged at us, Greg and me, screaming, "Shrug the mugger, mug the shrugger," and he was still 20-some feet away. "I know what we need to do with traitors like you, enemies of the people, all of you shruggers," and he pointed the gun at us. I thought it was straight at the lens of my camera, but I stumbled backwards because the entire press lineup retreated backwards away from him. So instead of the lens of my camera or me, the bullet hit Greg behind me, directly in the chest, and he collapsed immediately. It's like a cliche maybe when I say it, but I really wish it could have been me. Just a fluke that I stumbled.
Telling you how very sorry we are for the loss of your friend is always a pale, insufficient sort of... But we really are. As I said at the outset, the entire unedited footage of that incident is on file.
And the whole camera gear fell over with me. I stepped over it as I tried to help Greg. We laid him down on his side. He just looked up to me once and said, "I'm sorry, bud," and he was gone. But I stayed with him. I couldn't just pick up the camera and pretend he wasn't there. You see, that's why I don't have any footage of what happened next. I just saw it. The other guys had the footage, and that's what was out there in the media.
I'm not sure if you can answer our next question, Mr. Miller, about the recording that continued after your tripod and camera toppled, but the camera kept recording. Did you ever get a chance to review that?
Yes, I did.
Could you comment on it if we played it here? Your Honor, is it okay to play the footage now so we can finish with Mr. Miller?
No objection from me. How about the defense? Go ahead, Mr. Farkash.
The excerpt begins with the President's "You're fired, and the shot at Mr. Corngold. You say you've seen this, right, Mr. Miller? Because this is when camera and tripod were on the ground and pointed without your control at I have no idea what. Is that correct?
Correct.
These last couple of seconds here, we seem to see a slender man on a higher floor, third, fourth, or fifth, in a grey suit, probably bald, at least from the street level angle of view, rather than tall forehead, who made a kind of empowered, triumphant arm gesture. Can you take a guess if there could possibly be any association between the fatal events out on the street and that man's gesture? The timing, at least, would suggest that there is one.
To me, I gotta say, sure looks like applause or something like a congratulation that something went well. Weird. Must have been something planned or intended.
And then, when the President shoots at the defendant and gets himself shot, that person up there runs out of the frame in a state of alarm, whatever that signifies. No longer applause, that is.
Do not testify or interpret, counsel. Ask the witness.
I agree with Mr. Farkash. We have maybe half a second, but body language, yeah, the guy is scared, or at least shocked. Something went wrong.
Any idea who that could be, Mr. Miller?